Welcome to Original Being, where we explore the timeless wisdom of ancient practices and old ways of living, from holistic health and wellness to survival techniques, homesteading, and primitive skills. I'm Jillian Erice, a functional and holistic-minded physician associate and a homesteading mother of 3. I am on a quest to reconnect with this knowledge our ancestors lived by, practical skills, natural healing, and self-sufficiency in a modern world. Each episode, I'll be sharing insights, experiences, and conversations with experts and everyday people who embody this mindset. Together, we'll challenge modern conveniences, embrace hands-on learning, and rediscover the practices that have stood the test of time. Disclaimer, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. My opinions and those of my guests are solely our own and are not affiliated with any institutions, employers, or certifications. This podcast does not provide medical advice, and any health-related decisions should be made in consultation with your personal healthcare provider. By listening, you acknowledge that you take full responsibility for your own choices and actions.
Today on Original Being, we have Ashley Elenbaas. She began her journey with plants as a young girl. Her love of the natural world led her to study environmental restoration in the Appalachian Mountains of UNC Asheville, where she worked on organic farms and started taking herb classes with local herbalists. After traveling to Central America and working on permaculture farms and studying herbal farming, Ashley began her formal clinical herbal studies at Maryland University of Integrative Health in 2005, where she graduated with a Master's of Science in Clinical Herbal Medicine. For over 15 years, Ashley has worked as a clinical herbalist, seeing clients and teaches herbal courses online and in person. Ashley loves to blend herbalism and eco-spirituality and believes in the power of laughter while learning. She now offers weekly content on her YouTube channel, Sky House Herbs, teaches year-long online herbal apprenticeships, leads herb walks, hosts women's circles, and enjoys teaching kids about the power of herbal medicines in local Minneapolis schools. Thanks for coming on today, Ashley.
Oh, thank you, Jillian, for having me. I'm so excited for this show that you're hosting and just talk plants with another fellow plant lover.
Yeah, I love finding fellow plant lovers and we can nerd out on herbalism.
Yep.
So I read on your website that as a child you had some health issues and then those eventually ended up being resolved by a naturopath. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? And is that kind of what led you into loving herbal medicine?
It is, yeah. So when I was young, I had really severe asthma and allergies. And so I was like allergic to everything. Like I was constantly sick, constantly sneezing. I had like hives. I was allergic to cats, milk, just tons of things. And so as like a very, I look at it now as like very hypersensitive. Like I was just a very sensitive child. But at that time, in the 80s, it was like, no, you're just reactive. So what ended up happening when I was about 12, my mom took me to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and they did a skin patch test where they put all the allergens on your skin. They rake it in with this like comb, and I was allergic to basically everything. And they said, well, we have a clinical trial. We can put your daughter in for these new drugs. But other than that, there's really not much we can do besides just managing her symptoms. And my mom was like, that's not good enough. I'm not going to have my daughter be a guinea pig. So she then started looking into other options and she found a naturopath. And so this naturopath worked out of his home and he did acupressure, naturopathic medicine, and herbal medicine. And the first thing he recommended was that I take out all dairy and all meat because he said that's going to, we need to work on the gut. And so my mom joined me. It was really cool. Like she was like, I'm going to do this with you. So we both became vegetarians. And I started taking all of these supplements and doing naturopathic pellets and also acupressure. And in about 6 months, all of my symptoms resolved. Wow. It was pretty incredible. Like I had been really bloated because I had been on steroids pretty much my whole life because of all the allergies. So I thinned down. Like I didn't realize how bloated I was as a child. I look back at pictures and I'm like, oh my gosh, my poor little body. But, we didn't know. Yeah. I think a lot of parents and people just, they didn't know what options were out there. So after 6 months, like I remember feeling like I came out of this fog and I was able to like see things differently. Like it was like a perception change and my health got better and I was able to tolerate cats and I could roll around in the grass and I didn't have asthma attacks when I played soccer. So it was a huge turnaround for me and I think for my mom too. And so that kind of started her being more interested in holistic medicine and plants and me as well.
I feel like gut healing at that time was pretty innovative for this practitioner because that doesn't become such a mainstream thing until more recently.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of it, kind of goes back to the Hippocratic method, which is like, let food be thy medicine and let sunshine and air and just like the very basics, let those be what restores health. And so I feel like for my body, taking all of the junk out was like the first step for healing, and then adding in these very subtle medicines as well as like, herbs, which are subtle and chemical, right? Really it was just profound.
Were you ever able to add dairy or meat back in?
I was, yeah.
You
So
were? Okay.
after, I didn't want to because I was feeling so good.
Yeah, it's like scary.
But I remember when I went to college, I started eating cheese, and I was like, ooh, cheese, like I forgot about this, and butter. And that, so for a while I was eating cheese and butter, but then I was like, I don't actually this doesn't feel good. So now I can eat it. Like if I go out, I can eat them, but I've become so sensitive in my body that I know like I have thresholds of what feels good and what doesn't. And I was vegetarian all the way up until right before I conceived my first daughter. And I just all of a sudden started craving meat in my mid-30s. And then it was like a few months later I got pregnant. So I think there was some wisdom in like my body just needing some protein at that point.
Absolutely.
And so now my body does very well with especially like chicken and fish. I don't like beef as much, mostly because I just love cows. I just feel like, I can't do it.
Their big eyes.
They're those eyes. So, but it's, my body is resilient now in a way that it wasn't then.
Yeah. And I wonder how much of that is like, did you have a lot of antibiotics when you were really young? I don't know if you know, like when you were in your very early years, did you have a lot of antibiotics?
I did. Yeah. I think my mom said I was about 2 when I started getting infections and like ear infections and a lot of those where I was on antibiotics. So I think that was the start for me of the downgrade of my system.
Yeah, that's what I see a lot. And I had the same thing. And I was so dairy intolerant. We knew I was lactose intolerant. And I would take lactate pills starting at like 5 years old and continue to eat dairy, and then had chronic ear infections and tons of antibiotics. And I do attribute that to a lot of my personal health issues, as the years went on as well, because we just wiped out all that good gut bacteria, which I don't think when I was a child, people were taking probiotics yet. So we really just weren't replenishing what we were destroying.
Exactly.
And that naturopath you saw must have really known that and already been ahead of the game there.
Yeah, he really was.
Yeah. So then I also saw that you started out with yoga, and that kind of also led into herbalism. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So I took my first yoga class. I had a cool aunt. Like, I don't know if you have a cool aunt, but like if you are lucky enough to have like a cool aunt who introduces you to things, that I feel like she really planted a lot of seeds that I later grew into. So she took me to my first yoga class when I was visiting her. I was 13, and I was visiting her in Minneapolis. She lived in Uptown, which was like the cool, it place to live. And she was in her 20s. So she took me to a yoga class, and I just remember the incense, this huge Shiva statue, which I actually have a small one now that I have on my desk. So there was like a huge one of these. Yep. And I just remember, like, as a child with asthma, like breathing was always challenging. I just remember the teacher teaching me how to breathe. It was the first time someone had ever said, here is a way to breathe. And I was like, oh. And then moving my body with the breath, I was like, oh, and I've got this body I kind of didn't ever experience in this way. So that was like the first seed. And then when I went to school in Asheville, North Carolina I graduated in 97. So it would have been in 98. And I took a yoga and meditation class as part of my undergrad, like my opening credits.
That's
I just
cool
remember
that they
being
had
like, I know, it was really a cool, that program, it's a, liberal arts school. So, they had a lot of really interesting courses. And I took those courses, and I was like, yes, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to spend my energy and time. And so then I started studying Ananda Marga yoga. They had like a group that did yoga, in the cafeteria. I don't know. It was like a carpeted area, like a side room. And I just was like, this is good. And I had suffered from eating disorders, or really disordered eating since high school. And I remember feeling like, oh, like I can actually be at peace in this body. I don't have to fight it and starve it and do all the things I was doing to my sweet body.
Yeah.
And that really started me on a path of healing and like really deep exploration of my inner world and my inner voices. And so that really led me, starting a real serious yoga practice at 18. I took my first yoga teacher training at 23. So I started teaching yoga then at 23. And and then I think my interest in plants, when I was in school in Asheville, my undergrad was in environmental restoration. So I was like studying plant biology. I was studying, organic chemistry and looking at how do we restore places that have been destroyed or impacted negatively by humans. And so it kind of all came together for me because I was interested in consciousness, interested in wellness, self-exploration, and also interested in, exploration of the planet and the plants. And I realized, I think it was my sophomore year of study, that I didn't want to clean up after other people. I really wanted to like teach people about the planet and consciousness so they didn't mess it up.
Yeah, like care about it in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. So that kind of changed my trajectory, and I started moving into other areas of study with plants and with the consciousness.
And then, so were you living in Maryland then, or you were in Asheville then?
I was in Asheville for 2 years. So, I did like an associate's there in environmental science. And then I took a semester off, and me and 3 of my girlfriends, I bought a van, we had a dog, and we traveled around the United States for a whole semester.
I'm so jealous of people who did that. I didn't have that like wherewithal to be like, this is your chance to go do fun, crazy things.
Yeah. I feel lucky that my parents were like, well, this isn't ideal, but you will finish college. I was like, I promise. I just don't know what I want to do. And so I remember I was in Sedona, and we were like climbing the rocks, and there was this man and his son. His son must have been like 12. And I just started talking with him. He's like, and he said to his son, he goes, she's on her vision quest. She's asking the questions to figure out what the universe has in store for her. And I was like, oh, I am. Like I didn't, and I was like, at that moment, I was like, I'm on a vision quest. I'm trying to figure out what is my life path. And then through that, the rest of my travels, I was like, I want to go. And I thought at that point, I was like, I'm going to become a naturopath. So I started actually, while we were visiting, I visited a few different naturopathic schools on the West Coast. And so that's where I was like, okay, I'm headed there. But then when I got home to Maryland and I started continuing my undergrad education, I met Bob Duggan, who was the founder of Thai Sophia, or now the Maryland University of Integrative Health. And he taught a class there. And I was like, him. I was like, you meet these people. I was like, I need to spend time with him. So I got a job teaching, or I got a job as his assistant, basically scheduling appointments in the acupuncture clinic at his school. And I just sort of slowly worked my way into being an admissions counselor. And I worked there for 2.5, 3 years and realized, you know what, I could just do my herbal studies here. Yeah. It's a lot like a naturopathic school, only it's all herbs. And I was like, you know what, this feels actually like the next right step. So then I started my 3-year master's level study at that school.
Wow, that's a cool story.
It was a fun adventure. It's like, I feel really blessed that, like I have 3 planets in Aries. Yeah. So I'm like definitely a risk taker, and less so now that I have kids. But at that time I was like, if I had like a hunch, I would just go.
Yep. Yep. You just know when it's right.
Yeah.
I feel like that too. When it's right and everything just aligns and you just don't feel any hesitation. You're just like, yep, this is it. This is what I'm meant to do.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so then I do want to talk a little bit about being a registered herbalist, only because I know not everybody understands what that means to be a registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild, or what is required to be that, because there's so many different levels of education these days for herbalists. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it is an important topic because in the United States, there is no licensing for herbalists. And if you go to Europe and a lot of other countries, there are licensing boards. And so you become, a license, like just like we have for midwives and for like physician assistants and for even massage therapists, there's licensing.
Yeah.
But because there's no licensing in the United States for herbalists, what happened in the 1970s was a bunch of really highly trained herbalists came together and said, what would be something similar to licensing? Like, how do we create a group of really high level clinical practitioners that is sort of on par with licensing in Europe and the UK and in Australia, but also creates freedom? Because one of the things that can happen with licensing is you can be restricted in your scope of practice.
Right.
You might not be able to use certain plants. You might not be able to use certain modalities within that that practice. So I'm so grateful for the American Herbalist Guild and the herbalists who came together to form this guild. And so what they've created is standards for practitioners who want to practice clinically. And this is not for growers. This is not for people who are medicine makers. This is really for people who sit down one-on-one in client practices.
Yep.
And so what they have is they have a certain number of hours you need to have in, say, anatomy and physiology, a certain number of hours in chemistry, a certain number of hours of clinical skill training, and they call them, diagnostics or assessment. So you have all of these sort of academic hours you have to fulfill, and then you have separately clinical hours that you have to fulfill. So you have to have like over a certain number of hours of supervised clinical training.
Yep.
So that someone who is already a registered herbalist is overseeing you and will sign off to say, I approve that you are, able to practice at this high level of mastery. And, mastery is like loosely held, but like this level of integrity of being able to practice safely, effectively, using the tools that are part of clinical herbalism. So so that's basically what they do. And it's a pretty, there's only, I think, 350 or 400 registered herbalists in the United States right now. So it's a pretty small number, and they're working really hard to try to increase that number to have more registered herbalists available.
Yeah, I know some people or some herbalists find it a little bit controversial, maybe because of the same reasons you're saying. They don't want it to be so strict, or they don't want to not be able to call themselves an herbalist if they didn't do this formal training. But I think it's nice to have some of that standardization, that that there's this certain quality and level of education that goes into it. That if you're looking for someone as a clinical herbalist to see for yourself, that the background they have, that they've done all these hours and they really have the education behind them. So I think it's nice for that regard. And they've been a great resource, They've
got lots of great membership options. I mean, there's the associate level that you can, if you haven't done any of the clinical work yet, but you've actually, studied at different schools. And, what's nice about, I actually served on the board for 6 years in the education committee. So I spent a lot of time trying to open up the educational requirements so that they were more accessible to more people. And so I think they've done a good job of saying, you don't have to go to a 3-year full-time school. That's really not, most people don't do that.
Yeah.
So they have resources online so you can track your hours, and you can even go to a conference.
Yeah.
Or do an online webinar and use those as hours towards their requirements, which I think is really nice. And that just I think it makes it more inclusive for different learning styles and different paths of learning about herbs. And I also think you don't have to be a registered herbalist to be a really, really good herbalist. Like, I think that's true too. Some people really want that credential and they have the hours and experience, and some people don't even want it. They just want to practice and help people. And I think that's absolutely valid too.
Yeah, I
So I just
agree.
want to say that because I don't,
Yeah.
I don't, it's not like herbalism is a community, it's a community medicine, and it's not an elitist. It's not meant to be something that like only certain people can access.
Absolutely. Yep. I totally agree with that. Well, I wanted to tell a little story on here for our listeners because the way that I actually met you was on a virtual Italian folk medicine class, or folk herbalism, I should say, class. And your grandmother attended with you.
That's right.
And that was so sweet and so special. My grandmother was half Sicilian, half Irish. Her father came right from Sicily. And so that was why I was doing that class. But then to see you, and she had already passed away, but by the time I had done this class, but to see you there with her, it was so sweet. And I would love to hear more about that. Just like what brought you to take that class, about your ancestry. We can dive into a lot of ancestry stuff, but
Yeah,
I want to get into that.
yeah, totally. No, and I think that so many of us are looking to our ancestral lines now. Like
Yeah.
especially, I think a lot of women and men, I think, are looking back to the ways of their ancestors and what were the medicines and rituals, because I think we live in a time where we don't have a lot of ritual and a lot of rites of passage anymore. So, for me, I think I grew up with my grandmother, who is full Sicilian. Both of her parents immigrated here in the 20s, no, in the late teens from Sicily. And then my grandfather is Lithuanian, and so
Cool.
his parents came here also during that same period in the early 1900s when a lot of people were fleeing, war zones and poverty in Europe. So I think for me, I've always, I grew up in a very Italian family. Like my mom has 4 sisters and a brother, and my grandmother was always really connected with her sisters and brothers. So there was always Italian being thrown around in the hand, and like just, but the focus on family
Yeah.
and like ritual around food and around gossip, which the gossip part I've, not that has a whole backstory, but I feel like just the cultural familiarity really helped anchor me as a child. I felt like I had a place. And so when I got older and I was just like, well, what's my place now? And especially once I had children, I was like, what stories do I want to tell them? Where can I plug them into a place of familiarity? And so I started looking back into my ancestry and asking a lot of questions to my grandmother and my grandfather about their heritage. And so when I found the work of Gail Faith Edwards, whose course we took, I asked my grandmother, I said, do you want to take this with me? So we both registered for it. It was my birthday gift to her. And so, yeah, she was, I think, 91 at the time. She's 94 and still strong and
Wow, it's amazing.
thriving. Yeah. So we took that course together, and it just really opened up a lot of deep conversation about the archetypes, the mythology, the plants, and the stones and crystals and images from that era.
Did she remember stuff from her parents? Like, I know she was born here, right? But her parents, did she have anything that she remembered from that class, or that was she was like, oh yeah, we did that, or my parents did that?
Yeah, so she remembered her father always wore this little piece of coral that was in the shape of the horn.
The corncello, yeah.
Yeah. So she didn't know what the connection of that those were, that coral would actually wash up from the beaches, and people would hand carve that. And it was a very, powerful symbol of Sicilian roots and the abundance of the land. So that was something that she made a connection with. And she also, her father would send her out in the spring to the roadsides to pick dandelion greens and mustard greens. And the Hmong people who were also had come over, she would be picking alongside the Hmong. And there were no American children picking the greens. They were all, eating their Hormel canned foods or whatever. But she was like, she didn't realize that like that kind of harvesting in the spring of the spring greens was something that came over from Sicily. And then a lot of the, the prayers and also the guilt of like, one of the things that she remembered, say a Sicilian phrase was like, don't make Jesus cry. And that's such like, Jesus is crying. Don't make him cry,
Yeah.
like be a good girl. Like don't make the Lord cry because you're so misbehaved. So, there were just like little things that would bubble up from her, that I was like, oh, you know what? Like this is carried through, like maybe not in the exact words, but, there's things that I think traveled through to my childhood as well, and that I think have influenced me now as a mother.
Yeah. I love how you talked about belonging to, like, you felt like you belonged, because I felt like that too, even though my husband will tease me because he's a little more Italian than me. And he'll be like, oh, you watered it down. You're not as Italian, but it's not really a percentage. I think it's also what you identify with. That was our most recent immigration, because the Irish was a couple or a generation before that. And my mom's one of 8 children, and I'm the second oldest of 15 grandchildren. And my grandmother was like the matriarch of all of us. And she would tell the stories of her father and cook the food. And so I think a lot of us really attached to that Sicilian ancestry. And I've since obviously kind of tapped into all of my other, cultural ancestry. But you feel like, well, there's this, I just really identify with this. I identify with it because we felt like that was the culture of our family. And it didn't really matter what my actual percentage is of Sicilian. So it was really special for me to connect with that. I wish I had more time with her and more questions, I could have had answered from her, but I loved seeing you there with your grandmother. It was just like so heartwarming.
Oh, that's really sweet. And I know, like, she would ramble on to these stories, grandma. But, I think that in her era, like, I don't know, like time was different, like there was always enough time and space for everyone to explore stories. And, it's been really nice spending time with her, because I feel like she lives in a different time. Like time works differently in her consciousness. And so I'm like I bring my girls over. I try to, like, once every week or 2 weeks be like, okay, go sit on her lap and like get influenced by the land of her own, awareness. Because I like aspire to be slower in how I live. And I think she just naturally has never left that way of living.
Yeah. I remember my grandmother could make something delicious out of nothing, it seemed like. Like there'd be like not a lot of food, and then she would whip up like pasta fagioli, but it would be so good. And like, I don't know, just like, or she just like make something out of very little simple things. And it was just always amazing. That had to be this resourcefulness that she learned.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yep. So how does your ancestry impact your herbalism? Like, do you ever feel like you're specifically connecting with a line through specific plants?
Yeah, I think, one plant I actually brought onto the screen, so those of you who are watching, is rue. And rue is, this is dried rue from my grandmother's garden. She still grows rue, and her father was a huge gardener. So this is a plant she grows, and it's interesting because it's actually native to both Sicily and Lithuania and like the Baltic region of Europe and South America. So it's kind of interesting, this plant, like kind of like dandelions, like they grow in a lot of different, but like kind of more Mediterranean areas, but also like Baltic cold areas like Lithuania. But it was used in both cultures, both Lithuania and Sicily, as a protective talisman. And so it was grown outside of houses, and my grandmother has it growing outside of her back door to protect against the evil eye.
Yep.
And the idea of the evil eye is like jealousy, basically, like people wanting what you have or judging what you're doing with your life. And so it was used to protect against that. But it's interesting because in Lithuanian lore, it was also used for the eyes. It was used to increase eyesight.
I didn't know that.
And yeah, I actually I grew it in my herb garden in Maryland, and I had my photographer, she was doing like a photo shoot for our family. And I took off a sprig of the leaf. I didn't tell her anything. I said, put this on your tongue. And so she put it on our tongue, and I said, tell me what you notice. I always love to do that with people, just throw things in their mouth, and like people that don't know, because then I get like real answers. Yeah. And she's like, oh, interesting. She's like, I feel like the colors are starting to change. Like I feel like I can see things more clearly. Like my vision just got sharper. And I was like, yes. So she coming in blindly, no pun intended, really just that she had that experience. So I use it. I use a little pinch of it now in most of my herb formulas. So when I make a body oil or I make a huge tea blend, I'll just add a little pinch as like something that brightens the formula and also adds protection to it. So that's something that I found to be really helpful. But in high doses, it can be kind of toxic. I mean, I don't want to say toxic, but it's a very strong medicine. So it's something that you do use in very low doses. So it's not something I would like you wouldn't brew a tea out of it, right?
Yeah.
But you can add a pinch of it here or there as, and it's got this really lovely flavor too.
I love that because I actually grow it and I started growing it. I think after that class too, I'm like, I want to grow more like Sicilian magical herbs. So I have this beautiful rue plant and I think it's just got this like aqua color to it, to the leaves that seems a little different than other plants, which now is kind of fascinating that you say that because you're saying like colors are brighter. And that's something I've always noticed about the plant itself is that it seems to just have this vibrancy to it. But I haven't really known what to do with it besides that because I, had read that you really shouldn't ingest it a lot. So I love that. I'll have to just use like little bits more here and there like you're doing. I think that's really special.
Yeah. And I'll throw it in. It makes a really good dream pillow too. So I mix it in with lavender and other like dried chamomile and make like little dream pillows. So yeah, it's nice to have like just those like little touch points, I think, into your ancestry. And yeah, I think one of the things that really influenced me from that class that we took is the idea of herbs as talismans, like not just taking it for, physiological changes, but like an herb can be a friend and it can be like something that travels with you through time as like a protector or an ally. And I think that's something that I use a lot in my practice now is just like, how do we connect with plants on a deeper level and, not even having to ingest it to receive some grace or benefit from surrounding ourselves with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I did make those, I forget what they were called now, but they were like the little magical bags where you used like red fabric and there was like a little ball that was like garlic and stuff in it and like a saint. I can't remember what they were called, but I did it with my mom who is not quite as into, she's actually kind of getting into herbalism, but she certainly isn't into this kinds of things as much as me. But it was her mother that I was talking about, my grandmother. And my mom's a little more on the Christianity side. And I felt like it was really nice and to like blend these two, like I love how there is a lot of that blending of Catholicism coming in with some of these sort of like magical folk practices and how they were blended together. And it was a nice bonding experience.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I do think, because one of the things that I've been really interested in lately is like the history of the goddess in different civilizations and culture. And I feel like, one of the things that Gail said, and I took this other class through her school, and this woman, Max Harvey, I think her name is, she was saying that, the goddess imagery was found in basically every culture and civilization throughout recorded history. But what happened was, in Sicily in particular, was when the Romans came in and, then they brought in their Roman culture, but then they brought in the Christianity, is that the Sicilian people saw Mother Mary and said, oh, well, that's Vesta. That's the mother goddess of the hearth and the fire and like the divine mother. Oh yeah, we'll take that in. Like that makes sense. And so we see like the image of the heart, the heart of Vesta is now on Mother Mary. So that was actually a blending of the cultures of these different goddesses with Christianity. And so it's like, for me now, I was raised Catholic and I feel like, I had such a hard time with Catholicism. And I feel like I'm just now starting to come back and say, oh, wait a minute, it's not literal. I don't have, so now like my connection to Mother Mary and like I even have started to wear like some of the saints as like, medals and, using the prayers from Catholicism, realizing, oh, like the goddess is still there. It's not an either or. It can be a both and. And I feel like that's something that a lot of us are starting to put together again is like making peace with and finding connection to those Christian roots in a way that doesn't feel like oppressive, if you know what I mean.
That it's not through the lens of patriarchy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, coming back and saying, you know what, like Mary was a little bit oppressed here, and like she's this really magical being too.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I found that a lot with that course and with a lot of, Southern Italian, like kind of folk magic and things. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love coming back to our roots in that way too, and finding peace with these different aspects. Because I like to go back really, really far to, ancient goddess worship, but then to see the progression of religions and spirituality over time, and then sort of find those common threads through all of it, is so much more peaceful than the just combativeness in between, and what's right and what's wrong. I think they're all connected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. On your website as well, it says that you really like to match the plant with the person and like the essence of the person. I really want to hear about that. I love personalized and individualized anything.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that.
So my training in plant energetics, plant energetics means a few things. So like I want to define what that is. So we have like primary energetics, which is like using the four elements. So fire, water, earth, air, and that there are those qualities exist in people. Those elements exist in people in different amounts. And they exist in the plants in different amounts. And then we have the four qualities: hot, cold, damp, and dry. And then those are like patterns that set in motion physiological symptoms or benefits, right? Like they can go in the positive or in a more negative way. And the plants also have hot, cold, damp, or dry qualities in just kind of what their chemicals are. Like volatile oils are more heating, and we have polysaccharides, which tend to be more moistening and cooling. And then we also have where the plants live. So their environment is also either, can be a combination of hot, cold, damp, or dry. So when I'm sitting with a person, what I'm trying to do, and I do, tongue assessment, pulse assessment, and just sort of looking at them and then taking in all of their symptoms and patterns and psychological patterns too. And I'm looking at those energetic models and I'm saying, okay, where does this person fall? Like, do they have a dominance of fire, but they have a real issue with dampness? And they really want, they want to feel more steady. They want more earth, but they're feeling kind of stuck with how to get grounded because they're just ambitious and they want more and more and more. So I look at that and then I think about, okay, well, what plants both have an energetic imprint that is going to be maybe cooling to their fire, but gently building to the earth and gently moving to the water. And what plants also live in an environment that either, and this depends on the client, either mirrors their environment or counters their environment. And so that kind of depends on how stuck or moving a person is like whether I try to go contrary to what's happening or whether I try to go more sympathetic with what's happening in their body. And so then what I'll try to do, and usually this at this point, it happens pretty intuitively. I used to, I'm a sucker for spreadsheets and charts. So in the beginning, I would make a list and I would list all of the words and I would list all the qualities and I would list all the herbs and I'd list all the actions and I'd list all of, the compounds. And then I would use my brain to synthesize, okay, where are all the matching? Where do these match up? But now it's all in my head. Mm-hmm. So I can sit with a person and it very intuitively computates and I know all my plants. And so usually a few plants will kind of pop in the periphery and I'll jot them down during a session. And then by the end of the session, I know which is the plant.
Oh, I love that.
And and so usually what I'll do is I'll have them work really closely with that plant. And I think for me, I love to educate people. So I really want to teach them about the plant, show them the plant. Here, grow this plant. Let's let this plant, put it as a screensaver on your desktop. Make this plant your new best friend and ally, and really learn about this plant. And sometimes that's enough for the person. And sometimes I'll have to also go in with a formula, like we've got this gunk or this stuff, like let's use food and let's use herbs, let's use this formula to like move that along too. So it kind of depends on the client, but I'm always looking for the plant that's going to be an ally. And I have found it works really, really well. Like that's been probably the most effective part of my practice, is making those connections for people.
I love the use of the intuition, because on myself, I sometimes just try to, herbs just come to me, or like I don't feel well or something. And of course I have some knowledge of what might be good for a specific symptom, but I have so many plants and so many herbs, in my cabinet. And then I'll be like, I'm going to make a tea. And I kind of just am like, I feel like if I don't think about it too much, all of a sudden it will be a little bit different than maybe it would have been if I had only been thinking of it logically. And I love doing that.
Yeah. And I think that's how the plants communicate with us. It's like, they don't have mouths and they don't speak. So they communicate through their pheromones or scent. They communicate subtly through their colors, through, how they grow, their shapes, like the doctrine of signatures. And so when we connect with a plant deeply, then it becomes like a part of our like inner vocabulary. So we just don't even have to think. We just kind of know when we reach for the chamomile. We're like, everything about you says it's saying everything that I need right now. And I think that's like one of the levels that we can start to get to know the plants. And that's actually a lot harder than just memorizing, like a bunch of features and actions and compounds. I think it takes more practice, but I think for most herbalists, if they're honest, that's how they do a lot of their work.
So do you think everyone has one main plant that's like their plant ally?
Yes, for a period of time. Like it's kind of
like, it can change.
I think it can change over time. Like I've definitely, like I have some like really close allies, like nettle. Like nettle is like, I will never stray from nettle, and nettle comes in and out of my life pretty regularly. And then I have other plants that come in for a season, like, for me, one of the things I've been getting really into is native plants from Minnesota, because this is where my grandparents lived and my parents grew up. And now I've moved back to the land where the last two generations lived. So I'm like really trying to get to know these native plants. So like when I first moved here, bee balm, I was just obsessed with it. Like I would see it everywhere. I would harvest it. I made as much stuff as I could out of it. And I really, really got to know it. And so it's still with me, but I'm like, I don't reach for it as much as I used to, you know? So I think for a lot of people, there's like seasons that they get really into a plant, and then that kind of fades and then a new one comes in, but you never lose, you never lose those relationships.
Yeah. Oh, now I want to like do a reading with you and figure out what you think my plant is. That's really neat. And does that go along with the vitalist approach? Can you explain the vitalist approach to me?
Yeah, so the vitalist approach is the idea that there is a vital force that exists within us and within all of nature. And so from the vitalist perspective, we are not divorced from nature. We are not separate from nature. And that the best thing we can do for our own health is connect to the vital force of the land around us. And so it's kind of like what I was saying with the Hippocratic philosophy, which is like an ancient Greek philosophy of medicine, which is, let food, sunshine, water, and movement be the base of your health. And those really are like the base of our vital force. And so in the vitalist tradition, we always go back to those, like how are you moving your body? Are you evacuating your body? Are you, what are you feeding it? Are you drinking clean water? Because clean water is actually not as easy to get as we think.
Yeah.
So water quality is huge for our vitality. And then on top of that, the plants. And so the plants, one of the treatises of the vitalist tradition is like, use less plants and do more, like try to become more discerning with the plants you use. So in the vitalist tradition, they're not like, let's throw 30 plants on this person, but let's be more discriminating and use more targeted plants in more subtler ways to create larger lasting change. And it doesn't mean that you don't, if you have an acute infection, like you've got a dose every 4 hours, like that
Right.
feels true. But for most people with most things, gentle tonic cleansing herbs can be sufficient. We don't necessarily have to do a liver cleanse for everything. We can actually use very gentle tonic, supportive plants that can actually be more appropriate for a lot of things. So I hope that answers the question. Like that's kind of the idea with the vitalist approach.
No, that was nice because I kind of see that word used a lot, I think, through the herbal community. And I was just sort of like, what exactly does that mean? I think we did probably talk about it a little bit in herb school too, but it's nice to hear your definition of it. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And I think one more thing to add to the vitalist approach, which really resonates with me from a spiritual perspective, is that we're not in control. Like, and this is something that I get hit over the head with again and again. It's like, okay, you have the sore throat, you take all the herbs, you drink the garlic, you do the fire cider, and then you still get sick. So like, is it the herbs that didn't work, or is it that there's a higher force that said, no, Ashley, you have to rest. Like you're not getting out of this so quickly. Your body actually, you need to stop and rest. And that's actually what you need. It's not all the herbs and keep going.
Yep.
And I love teaching people about that part of it because I think, we tend to think of like, well, it's all cause and effect and I have absolute control over my health. And like from the vitalist tradition, you actually don't. We can work with the vital force, but ultimately the maker of the vital force wins. And for me, I find comfort in that because it's like, okay, I bow. like I get humbled again and again by the workings of that greater force in my life and in my kids' life. And then like, I realize it's okay. It's okay sometimes to lose and to be sick, right?
I think everyone just wants everything gone as fast as possible. And so just like you said, I mean, I'm absolutely guilty of this. I'll be like, I'm sick. I'm taking the fire cider. I'm taking the elderberry syrup. I'm drinking tons of herbal teas and I'm taking zinc and vitamin C and I'm just loading it all on because you're like, and we probably did shorten the course of it or shorten the duration of the virus. But the body still needs to rest and we're supporting the immune system and what it needs to do naturally anyway. And so sometimes you might feel much more sick before you feel better. And it's not that the herbs didn't work. They probably did work. It's just that, like you said, it's out of your control and the body still has to fight in the way that it's supposed to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But supporting it, I think, is the best thing. And then some of these herbs just lifting up and giving that boost to our bodies and to our immune system is so needed and awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. So I also saw, this is kind of changing topics a little bit, but I saw that your husband is an astrologer, which I think is so amazing. I'm like, you guys are the like magic duo. This is like the coolest couple ever. Do you two ever sort of work together or have you brought, I know there's like a herbal astrology thing too. Have you ever kind of brought that into your practice?
I do. Yeah. So, I mean, I started kind of dabbling in astrology around like when I was a teenager, when I started getting into tarot. So like at 13, 14, I had like a tarot deck. I had my astrology books. And so I've always been interested in those things. And when I met my husband in 2010, and he was like, full-time astrologer, like, I was like, cool, and I was like full-time herbalist yoga teacher. So when we met, we brought both of our worlds together and opened up a yoga studio called Sky House Yoga. And so he did his astrology and I did herbs and yoga. And we actually would teach what we called a planet and plant class. So on Friday nights, we would look at what are the transits in the sky. And then I would pick an herb and teach a yoga class, like movements that would correlate with the energy that was coming through. Mm-hmm. And that was really fun. So we did that for a while and we've taught classes together. We were in Toronto teaching at an astrology group for a weekend. We did a full weekend of matching the planets. We did the houses, like a one plant per house. And we taught that so together. Cool. And we've done a lot of workshops, in different places over the years together. And we will sometimes go on each other's channel and do like, we're actually planning to do like an herbal quickie this week. So that'll come out. So we teach together, and it's really fun. And I have to say, like, for me, it's so helpful because like we've had so much sickness in our house over the winter. And I'm like, tell me again when it's going to end. He's like, April 18th, Mercury or Mars is going to come out of Cancer in your first house. Like, things are going to shift. And for me, it's just helpful to have these like little guideposts and maps to kind of see what's moving. And for me, it's just helpful in surrendering. Like, this is bigger than me. Like, I just have to live through this and learn the lessons of this particular transit. And it helps me know the herbs. Like right now, like I'm drinking nettles again because it's like, I know what's coming and
I'm ready for spring.
Nettles is fortifying for what's ahead. So, it's really nice to have the two together.
Yeah, I think that's amazing that you have this personal astrologer all the time. Because I'm often like, I got to look up what's going on right now because things are not good or, whatever's happening. And I love looking into that. But I've also found that people who have, I don't know, like even if there's like one thing in common for their big three, like their sun, rising, moon sign, tend to get along more. So I have like this running list of like my friends and my family, what their like sun, rising, moon sign are, because there's always something in common. And I am really starting to be able to pick up on people like when I meet them and be like, oh, I bet they have this, or like, and then I love that. 'Cause I just find it to be so accurate. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. So what is yours?
I'm a Sagittarius sun, a Taurus rising, Aries moon.
Oh, nice. Okay, so here's why we're connected. So I am a Taurus sun, Taurus moon, so I'm a new moon baby, and then I'm Cancer rising.
Oh, interesting.
But I have my Mars, Mercury, and Venus in Aries.
Yeah, you said you had a lot. Yeah.
So and my daughter, she's a Sag sun. So I love the Sag energy. It's so infectiously cheerful and like exciting. So that's awesome.
Yeah, my husband's Sagittarius too, but he's right on the border of Capricorn, and I feel like he's got a lot more of the like Capricorn tendencies. I'm like, you're not like a true Sagittarius.
A little too like earthy and productive, right?
Yeah, not quite as adventurous. I'm like, let's go do this fun thing, and he's like,
Yeah. My husband is a Capricorn moon, so
okay, yep,
and he's a Taurus rising, Cancer sun.
Oh, so you guys have something in common too.
We do.
See?
Yep.
Always something.
It helps. It really does.
Do you ever ask your clients, like, do you have your clients astrology at all to like look into their plants too?
I do. Yeah. So on my intake form, I have them write in their, date of birth and then their birthplace and birth time if known. Mm-hmm. And I'll sometimes just plug in their chart and just look. I mean, I don't run it by my husband. He's too busy with his own practice, but I know enough to be able to plug it in and be like, okay, what are like the big three, right? Mm-hmm. And then also like, where are there any squares? Like where are there afflictions to what houses? And in medical astrology, the houses also rule different parts of the body. So I can say, oh gosh, I'm going to have to make sure I ask about the lungs or I ask about digestion and things like that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I would love to learn more about that. I'm definitely not well versed in medical astrology, but I think that's so cool that you're able to incorporate that into your herbal practice.
Yeah, it's a little place.
So what plants are coming up for you besides nettle for the spring? I actually wanted to ask you today because I've been feeling so gloomy. I'm in Maine, so it's still winter. Yeah. It's been very gloomy and it's getting to like start to get into mud season. So first I'm like, I want to ask about winter herbs, but I'm like, no, you know what? Spring is coming. And so let's talk about spring herbs instead. What's coming up for you? What are you sort of recommending for people as we transition into spring?
Yeah, I'm just telling everyone to start their nettles now. And so the way that I was taught and the way that I teach people to use nettles is as an overnight hot infusion.
Okay.
So I have a quart mason jar here that I'm just holding up. And so what I like to do is fill it with about a cup of dried nettles and then just pour hot water over the top and cap it. So this makes about 4 cups of then tea. And so I usually do this at night. So I'll put my nettles, put my hot water, cap it, let it sit on the counter overnight. And if you really want to get witchy with it, you could like take like, you put your lid on and you could put like a crystal on top and set it like in your windowsill. That can be fun. I sometimes do that. If I like want some like heart chakra stuff, I'll put on like a rose quartz or a crystal, depending on what I need. And then you just let that sit overnight. And then in the morning, you just pour it through a strainer and then you drink that whole quart before noon.
Wow. Okay. Before noon.
Before noon, because then you're not peeing all night, which nobody wants. And you get nourishment and energy. And a lot of people find, some of the qualities of nettles that make it really good for right now is that it is gently cleansing. So some of the winter yuckiness and heaviness that I think all of us are feeling, it just starts to move that out through the kidneys, through the bowels, through the skin, through the lungs. It also clears the skin up, which I think, like, I know my winter skin is like my least favorite. Like I'm a summer girl. Like I think my Sicilian skin gets like, I get tan and I love getting dark in the summer. So I think like the pasty, like pale skin, it just starts to clear it. And I start to feel like a little more glowy, which feels really good for my body. It also is full of chlorophyll, which is only one molecule off from our own hemoglobin. So it's really building for the blood. And it's really high in iron and a bunch of essential minerals. And I think the chlorophyll is also, it's energizing. So I find when I drink a quart of nettles every day, I don't need as much caffeine, which is overall better for my body. So like a lot of my clients and students find that they can actually even come off of caffeine if they're wanting to and just do the nettles for getting that spring energy.
That's great. I definitely need to cut back on caffeine, so I'll have to do that.
I know. I think when we start dragging in the winter, it's like, oh, what am I like the caffeine, it helps, but then you get dried out.
Yeah. And you crash because it lifts you up so high that then you crash back down lower. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I did bring a few other herbs and for a little recipe, which is, I think, a nice transition recipe for people coming out of winter, going into spring. So you could do the nettles overnight infusion. That's definitely something you could just think of as like your multivitamin moving through spring. But if you're like me and you're just feeling a little bit dried out and like maybe a little depressed, even like a little gloomy, I have 3 herbs that I recommend using together. And is it okay if I just share?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great.
So the first one is marshmallow root. And marshmallow is really thick, it's mucilaginous, it's cooling, and it's really healing to dry mucosa. So I like to blend this with rose petals, and rose is like such a beautiful medicine of the heart. It's antidepressant. Actually, some of the volatile oils in the petals have been shown to have antidepressant activity in clinical trials, which is, I love clinical trials. So I'm like, yes, it's true. And then cinnamon, because cinnamon is, it's both demulcent, so it has these like polysaccharides, which are like those long chain sugars. So it's like sweet and a little bit softening, but it also has tannins, so it's a little bit astringent and drying, which is just like brilliant. It's like, yay, plants, you have everything. Yeah. So, and then it's spicy, and the familiar taste, I think, just it starts to stir up a little bit. I was telling a client that like I think cinnamon helps you to be your best Mars. Like it makes Mars energy. Like if Mars is the god of war or the goddess of war, I feel like what it does is it helps you speak and assert your Mars energy very well without hurting yourself or anyone else. So it's like tempering the assertion of that Martian energy, which it's really good at that. So then what I like to do is do the same thing as I'll use like a quart-sized mason jar like this one, and I'll do equal parts of marshmallow, rose, and cinnamon. And just for like, if you don't feel comfortable just pouring herbs in, I would say maybe like 2 tablespoons of each. Personally, I do 4 tablespoons of marshmallow because I run so dry. All those Aries planets, right?
Me too. Yeah.
So I would do maybe like, 2 parts marshmallow root and then 1 part cinnamon and rose petal. And you fill it with cool water. So it's a little different. You don't want to pull all the tannins out. So I do cold water or cool water, cap it overnight, strain it, and then you drink it in the morning. And it's just like when my dog passed last year, we had to put our sweet rescue dog to sleep. I drank this like every day because it was like both calming and soothing to my heart, but also gave me that energy to be like processing and engaging with my children and engaging in the world without, feeling so shut down. So that's a really nice one too.
Yeah, I'll have to make that. That sounds lovely for especially this time of year. Because also the cinnamon's still giving you that warming quality, which I still need right now. It's still very cool and I have very poor circulation. So I love cinnamon for that.
Totally.
Yeah, that's great. I love those. Those are great, recommendations. I was going to ask you what your favorite herb is right now, but you might have already answered it because I think you were saying that. So maybe it is nettle, unless you have another one. But I was going to say, just personally right now, what is your favorite herb to work with?
Yeah, I've been using blue vervain a lot. That's kind of been my herb of the year. I've been dealing with a lot of neck tension. And I think because we've had so much sickness, like, even though I know I'm not in control, I like to pretend like I am and I like to micromanage.
Yeah.
So blue vervain is, yeah. So like, I think blue vervain is like the quintessential herb for people that like to micromanage and control situations, and people that hold tension in their neck and in their jaw. And I'm definitely like a grinder and a clencher. So I've been really using that a lot, especially like right before bed. It's on my nightstand. So
a tincture?
Tincture.
Yep.
So I'll take a full dropper of the tincture before bed and I can just feel it. It just sort of like, it's like it's like a cooling, relaxing energy in my body that just sort of helps me dissipate the holding on so tightly. And then if I remember, I'll take it in the morning and I'm a nicer person throughout the day.
I take it a lot too. I think I'm out of tincture now because I grew it myself and made a bunch. So I had all these little jars of it, but I was just putting it in all the time and it's gone now.
Nice. Yeah, it's a good one.
But I do too. I clench my jaw. I get a lot of neck tension as well. So it's interesting because I was more just using it because I think I'm just so like high strung.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a
Those
great
often
herb.
go together though, the high strung and the clenching, right?
Yes, absolutely. And then what would you say? I think I'm going to ask every herbalist this question. What is the most underrated herb of all the herbs that people are just sort of overlooking and actually you would say is underrated and has a lot of amazing qualities?
I think bee balm or Monarda fistulosa. I mean, it's really hard to find in commerce. Like, I always know something is not really, it's not in the public eye when it's not at Mountain Rose Herbs,
Yeah.
And I think they might have it, but it's not always available. But Monarda fistulosa or sort of the native prairie bee balm is such an incredible medicine for like anxiety and tension. I used it I had a infected cut on my foot and I used it as a topical compress and it just cleared the heat out. It's like one of the best heat dissipating herbs. And herbalist Tismal Crow of the Muskogee people and of this region here, he lived in Minneapolis for many years. He used it, like he has a whole chapter on it. It's like the biggest chapter in his book. And, there's just, 100 ways of using it. Another way that it's used that I think is brilliant is as an anger diffuser. So in the Muskogee tradition, if there was a fight in a house or there was like hostility in an environment, they would put a big pot of water on the stove and throw some bee balm in and let it diffuse, like steam out the house, and it would clear the anger because the home is the holder of energies. And so, if something comes up, you have to make sure not only do you resolve it between the people, but you resolve it within the home. So I love that use of it. And it's used for stomach aches and cramps. It's used for nightmares in children, which I've used it a lot for my children. It has a ton of uses. So I think it's a native plant that's a lot like oregano. They call it wild oregano. So I think I'd like to see more herbalists using that because I think it's just so prolific and it's a great
and it grows. Yeah, we grow it and it does amazing.
Yeah.
I actually have a Monarda story. When I did my first in-person gathering for Vermont Center for Integrative Herbalism, we were mostly online, but then we would have like in-person, get-togethers. I ended up getting an actual sinus infection. I know most people think they have sinus infections when they just still have a cold, but it had been like weeks past the cold and it got way worse again. It was horrible pain, horrible intense in my face. And one of the other students was like, oh, you should do a Monarda steam. And I had never done that before. And it wasn't really on my radar as a plant either. So I did like a big steam with the towel over my head. And I was totally better. Like it was amazing. And now that's just my go-to. I mean, no one in my family's ever needed antibiotics for a sinus infection. If anyone starts to get really stuffed up, I'm like, Monarda, let's do a Monarda steam.
I love that. I'm going to keep that story. I'm sticking it in my herbalist pocket now. That's awesome.
Yeah. I think it just really did have the volatile compounds enough to get in there and fight bacteria. So it was really, really great. But yeah, that's a lovely plant. And we just started keeping bees this year. So it's nice, obviously, for that too, because they love it.
Totally. Oh, good for you. That's such a great practice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really exciting. Well, I do want to talk about us both having the same dog because I saw that you're getting a new puppy.
We are. Yes.
And I also saw that, so we both have English Mastiffs for people listening who don't know. And your husband had posted about what's your English Mastiff's name?
Her name is Hilda.
Hilda, that yours was so sensitive and that it almost like had opened him up to some of his feelings through her. And we found that with ours too. And we knew that these were really sensitive dogs going into it. But why did you select an English Mastiff in the first place? Is there a story behind that?
Yeah. So I've always had rescue dogs. Like that's just been like something really close and important to me. And, my husband, like he's like, he always wanted a Mastiff, like a big kind of guardian dog. And I was like, we have small kids. I thought big guarding Mastiffs might be dangerous around kids. Yeah. I didn't realize that they're actually probably the best because they're going to really look out for them. Like they're so sensitive and there's just such great guardians in that way. So my husband had always wanted one and I always said, no, 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 no. So then when our dog Rhea was starting to get older, I really wanted to bring on a younger dog. And so he wanted the Cane Corso, which is the Italian Mastiff. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, no, no. And so we looked and I said, I could do an English Mastiff. So we looked at local shelters and there just happened to be an English Mastiff at a shelter.
No way.
Yeah. So we went and visited her and it was like, in Avatar, like when that like dragon thing and the Avatar connect and that like they plug their like hair into the tail and there was like a bond. As soon as Hilda and Adam met each other, it was like zoop. Aww. And I just started crying. I was like, oh my gosh, this is your dog. So, and she was really skinny. She had been abused and abandoned and she had high anxiety. She was on a bunch of meds. So it was, like we knew we had some work ahead of us, but we were like, this is it. So we brought her home and, through a lot of help from a trainer and just a lot of patience, she's off all of her meds. Her anxiety is like pretty much gone and she's like healthy and happy and it's been amazing. So then when our other dog, our older dog, passed last February, my husband was like, well, maybe we could do the Italian Mastiff. And I started becoming more open to that. So we found a breeder here in Minnesota who has like just a love of that breed. And so we decided to bring in another dog for Hilda because I think Mastiffs, they do fine alone as long as there's humans around, but they also do very well, I guess, with other Mastiffs.
Yeah, mine does not like to be left alone. I mean, you can tell, and I don't leave her alone very often because I work from home, so I'm here a lot, but she is attached to me like Velcro. And when we leave, she's just at the door like, you're not taking me? Yeah, so we should get her a friend too.
So that's kind of what we thought, similar thing. Like we both work from home, so we're home a lot, but when we do leave, it's like, she doesn't have anything to do. Like she guards the house, but apparently when you have two, then they like really like they join forces and they kind of like keep each other more focused and also more relaxed, which is kind of interesting. So we'll be bringing home Thor is his name. He's a little gray Italian Mastiff. He'll be coming home with us, I think, at the end of April.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see when you get him.
Thank you. Yeah. Our girls are extremely excited.
Yeah. I think we had a rescue dog that was Mastiff Great Dane mix. And then she ended up getting hit by a car actually, which was horrible. And then my husband was like, I really loved this. I really loved the Mastiff qualities in her. And like, I always wanted just a regular Mastiff. And so we did get her from a breeder. And yeah, just the sensitivity, like she knows who's not feeling well. She goes right to them. You know, she protects the kids. She loves the kids. She's so gentle, but she does seem scary if the mailman comes.
Yeah. Yep.
But she is actually like such a sweet, loving dog. They're very, very loyal. So I do love the breed. So I can't wait to see you get the other one.
Yeah, thank you. And if you get a second, I would love to see too. And if, maybe I can give you some assimilation
Yeah,
advice.
let me know how it goes with another one.
Yeah.
Well, Ashley, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or we're hoping to touch on today?
No, I guess, one of my final, I guess, closing thoughts for listeners is just to look into your ancestry. Like, it doesn't matter where or how long ago it was. I think there's something really important about looking into your ancestral lines, and then the medicines and the stories, and learning about the land that they came from. I think it fills in a lot of question marks for a lot of people as they do that deeper work, and just being open to the images that come through and the plants that come through during those exploration. I think that for me has been one of the biggest takeaways of my kind of recent work. So that would be my little closing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it also prevents, like cultural appropriation, because you actually can find your own, plants that maybe your ancestors used for magical purposes or whatever the other reasons that you're looking for them to be. So I think that that's something we all really should be doing too.
That's a great point too. Yes.
So tell everyone what your offerings are and what's coming up next for you in your business.
Well, I took a 3-year sabbatical just to self-resource and just really ground myself here in Minnesota after moving back. And I started opening up my online apprenticeships last year. So this will be my second year running this new format. I've been running these for, I guess 10 years now.
Wow.
But I love that I took a break and really reformatted. And I added a lot more, I don't want to say spirituality, but earth-centered vitalist philosophy into this new course. So yeah, I'm really excited to teach that course for the second time coming up this year. And my favorite part of it is that we have 2 plants. So I like to teach plants in partners so that you can compare and contrast them. So for every module, you'll have 2 plants that you'll work with. You'll take them separately and then you'll blend them and see how they work together. And then every module, you'll take in plants from the module before and then blend them in. So we're just sort of bringing in more and more plants each time so that people can forge a really deep relationship with them individually, but also start to get the confidence to put them together in new ways.
Yeah, that's really nice. That sounds like an awesome program.
Great.
And that's virtual, so people could come from anywhere?
Yep,
Yeah.
That's virtual. And then for people who are local, I offer garden gatherings once a month in the summer months. So people can come to my property and I've got a garden and we do medicine making. And even for people who aren't in my course, it's open to the public. So people can come and do actual live. I usually do art, meditation, and then medicine making together one weekend a month.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, where can everyone find you? Tell them your website, your social media accounts.
Yeah. So folks can find me on skyhouseherbs.com. So that's the website where you can find links to all of my courses and also the in-person and online gatherings. I'm on YouTube. I make weekly content there, and that's just at Skyhouse Herbs. And then I'm on Instagram at Skyhouse Herbs and on Facebook at Skyhouse Herbs. And I just joined, what is that new one? Blue Sky?
Blue Sky, yeah.
I'm on Blue Sky at Skyhouse Herbs too. So if you just look me up in all those places. Yeah. It's fun though. I feel like I really am enjoying the community of my online platforms. I did a lot of weeding out, of my accounts just to really make it a place that I enjoy being. So I feel like now the community is just really cool people from all over the place that I feel like it's like a garden of itself, which has been really fun.
Yeah, I love that. I know when you get all the stuff, the beautiful, positive things that you want to see every day, it's much nicer an experience.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You're a wealth of knowledge, and that was just a lovely conversation. I loved getting to know you more.
Thank you, Jillian. I really enjoyed that too. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to leave a review. In that review, I would love to hear what topics you'd like to see covered next and which guests you'd love to hear from in future episodes. You can connect with me on Instagram at Original Being Podcast, and be sure to follow, like, and share the podcast on all platforms to help spread the word. Thanks for listening.